Hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be talking about holiday scams and how to protect yourself as well as your business from these seasonal threats. I will ask at anyone to post questions in the question box and we will answer them throughout and then have a question and answer section at the end. I'm excited to welcome a NetGain colleague and two retired FBI agents today. So can each of you tell us a little bit about your background? I'll let David kick it off.
Oh yeah, myself. So I am vice president with NetGain. Welcome everybody. I began my career as a trial attorney prosecutor, advanced into cybersecurity after working at Lloyd's of London. That was back a long time ago in the Y2K era, and I've been in cybersecurity and IT leadership for the last 26 years. I will pass it over to Darren Mott.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Darren Mott. I'm a retired FBI agent. Spent 20 years in the FBI doing cybercrime related matters and leading cybercrime squads, as well as doing some counterintelligence and leading some counterintelligence squads with a cyber nexus to what it is that we did. Since retiring, I work at a cybersecurity operations center. I do some consulting on the side, and I host some podcasts.
Excellent.
Well, hello,
we'll have
everyone.
links.
I'm Scott Augenbaum, retired FBI agent also. It was 30 years ago today. I was sitting down in Quantico, Virginia at the FBI Academy. I didn't join the FBI to work cybercrime. In 95, I started, and the role of the FBI was easy. Bad people in my area of responsibility did bad things to good people. I worked with state and local cops, and we put bad guys in jail. And since I had advanced computer skills in 97, which meant I knew how to use AOL, I became the cyber guy in the office, and I haven't been able to shake that title ever since, and retired almost 7 years ago when I thought we were in ground zero for cybercrime in 2018. And here we are today, some 7 years later, and the problem just keeps getting worse and worse. And I'm so excited to be here with my good friend Darren Mott, who I've known for years, and David. We've worked together for quite some time. So excited about being here today.
Well, I appreciate you both being here. So, it seems like the holidays are an absolute hotbed for cybercrime. It's targeting both businesses, small, mid-sized businesses, business leaders, as well as individuals while they're out shopping and going about their daily lives. What makes it prime time hunting season? Like, what is it based on your experience with the FBI and even afterward? Why do scammers and cyber criminals ramp up their efforts this time of year? I'll pass it over to Darren for some insight.
Honestly, I don't think it's that they're ramping it up at Christmas time. I think it's another time of year to do the same thing they do all during the rest of the year. When it's Valentine's Day, they create Valentine's Day related scams. When it's Father's Day, they do the same. When it's Christmas, they do the same, and seems to have more impact, largely because it's a lot better media story to say, ooh, look at all these bad guys targeting people at Christmas. Plus, I mean, you have Cyber Monday, right? And you have an increased shopping season. So people are looking to spend money. So if people are looking to freely spend money pretty quickly, then the bad guys are looking to freely steal that money pretty quickly if they can do that as well.
Absolutely. Scott, what's your take on it?
Well, this is the time of year we all want to give. We're all in that really, really festive season. And, you compare from 10 years ago to today, we were all running out. We were going to the shopping malls. And today we're all shopping online. And between Black Friday and Cyber Monday, we have almost 190 million Americans shopped online. And as I like to call it, what I call Cyber Criminal Tuesday, is the day after the shopping season, you're going to get a social engineering attempt. And did you recognize I didn't say phishing? I said social engineering, which could be either a telephone call, a text message, an email from, let's just say it's Amazon or the Postal Service, or it says you get a text message from Visa saying that, hey, we've noticed some suspicious activity. Please click on the link. Now, out of those 190 million people who shopped online, And now we have billions and billions of usernames and passwords. We've got billions of cell phone numbers on the dark web. You're going to get one of these messages. And David, what's going to happen if, let's just say, our elderly parents, and my 22-year-old calls me at 55 as elderly parent, what do you think happens when your elderly parent gets that text message that says it's coming from Visa? There's
Like
no,
I Yeah, I can tell you there's a lot of validity given. There's almost a presumption that it's valid, right? Because I was using my Visa. I was this time of year more than ever. We're shopping. We're making more transactions, it seems, and then we're engaging with the prime vendors like Amazon and like UPS. We're shipping things out to relatives and to coworkers, etc. And so something could go wrong with those packages. And so getting
and
those texts
Darren, and
might seem
and
like
if you listen to Darren's podcast, we're talking about this all the time. And Darren, why is it so important, you think, that, we change the narrative that it's not phishing, but it's social engineering? Explain the whole overarching thing of social engineering.
absolutely.
Right, well, it's just getting people to act against their own interests in a way that's engaging to them to interact with whatever it is you're getting. Phishing is kind of, I mean, phishing goes back obviously to the beginning of spam and email frauds where it's just a wide swath of emails go out, right? But now it's phishing really it's probably the wrong term, and you're smart to use social engineering because they're not really phishing anymore. It's focused directed activities against individuals to steal the information they need to get what they want. So, and that could
And what do they
be
want?
your information, whatever it is that they can use to scam it. Your login, your password, your account numbers, and it doesn't have to be email, like you said. It could be a text message, could be a phone call. Take your pick. Could be a WhatsApp, could be a TikTok message, right? Click on this link for the latest in cryptocurrency information. We'll give you all you want to invest and make millions of dollars.
So let me ask you about this. What can individuals do when they're bombarded with these? What are some of the best practices that, based on your experience, that you all recommend for the individuals? And then we'll
And I,
get to the business leaders.
yeah, and I focus primarily on individuals. I've been trying to change corporate culture for 25 years, and I've given up. I'm going to be sorry. I don't really, because I've dealt with so many large breaches, and I've dealt with so many ransomware things, and we've told these people before, but it kind of breaks my heart, when I get the call from, my kid's friend's grandparent who got socially engineered by a pop-up on her
Right.
computer, and it said it was Apple security, and call the 800 number, and she called the 800 number, and the bad guy socially engineered her through through talking, and said, hey, there's a problem with your bank account. Where do you bank? She says, I bank at Wells Fargo. Oh, let me connect you to Wells Fargo. Another cyber criminal gets on the phone, and at that point, they talk about how much money's in her account, and she needs to get the money out of her account. So they direct her to go buy gift cards. And you see, so now it's almost a hybrid attack, and then they get her to download something. So my whole thing that I want people to realize here is we need to understand social engineering. We don't need to, I mean, I've been telling people for years, think before you click, think before you act. Any type of communication, there is a way for a cyber criminal to get in the middle and to trick us to do something we normally wouldn't do. What was the trick here? Buy gift cards.
Right. And it seems after the fact so obvious, doesn't it? Like that's probably not something that should be done. But given the validity of the brands that the cyber criminals align themselves to and portray and impersonate, and what you just brought up, both Darren and Scott, is how well organized these groups are. Can you guys explain that to the audience? Like, this is not just like a kid in a hoodie in his mom's basement drinking Red Bull, cracking code. This isn't just a hacker in like the way the media has portrayed hackers. This is organized crime with vast amounts of resources and personnel, isn't it?
Right? 30 years ago, it was the hoodie guy in the hoodie, right? Sure.
Right.
But obviously, as people were able to make money on it and organized crime realized, hey, there's a low risk here and high gain, then you started to see Eastern European organized crime that committed traditional crime activity start to move towards the cyber realm. And it's moved from Eastern Europe to East Asia. You have large farms in Myanmar and Thailand that are basically just human slave camps that are used. And these people get a script and say, this is what you're going to say. So when you get that call on your phone that says, hey, we have the latest in Medicare updates, what's your Medicare number? And they go down that road. And if they get the right person who thinks, oh, I can get $187 extra a month because of this new Medicaid law, I'm surely going to give them all that information. And it's very easy to transition that to tech support stuff. Hey, this is Amazon calling, and someone just purchased a $1,800 laptop. Was that you? And you say, no, I didn't order an $1,800 laptop. Well, let me help you get that charge off of your credit card and fix your system because you must have been hacked. Download this file, and I'll help you walk through it, all that kind of stuff. So, because it's so organized, they have different areas. They can move you from the initial call to customer service to the manager to the tech support, and all along the way, it's different levels of scammers that are working to get your information.
And this isn't anything new. Yeah, I
No,
mean,
right.
I
Right.
remember when I did one of my first briefings to the private sector in 2000. One of the things we were talking about is, and it's a term I'll never forget because I used to use it all the time, there are no boundaries in cyberspace. We are opening up our world's networks to people here in the US. That's 2000. So in 2007, when a young reporter by the name of Brian Krebs broke the story of what was known as, and this is Darren's favorite word because he loves it. You'll see his expression, the Russian business network, the Bulletproof Hosting Company in St. Petersburg, Russia. And I think Darren's taken a couple of flights to Russia. So make sure you ask him about those questions here, David, because those are always fun times when these are amazing stories. But so we knew that as the FBI since 2003, 2004. Brian Krebs breaks the story. We talk about it. I go out to the Tennessee Bankers Association and I say to them, how many of you guys are concerned that Russian organized crime is a threat to the financial services sector? And
What was
David,
their
how many?
response? Yeah, what
No
was their
one.
response back
No one.
then?
First of all, somebody corrected me and said, sir, you're in Tennessee. You don't say you guys, you say y'all.
Right.
And then I kind of came up, and this is really where a lot of times that Darren and I really got together and had our mind melds here and collaborated, because I think I even remember calling Darren and saying, look, these people in the financial services sector have no idea that the FBI says that Russian organized crime is the number one threat to the financial services sector in 2007. Whose responsibility is it for the private sector to know what the FBI considers the number one threat? It was my job, it was Darren's job. And that's where we
Right.
had this effort. And I was doing it in Nashville, and he was doing it up in Cleveland and in Huntsville. And that was
Well,
what was so different.
yeah, I mean, you really bring up excellent points, and that is when people get online, right? Whether it's from their phone, which most people use more than any other device, or while working from the laptop or the workstation at the office or at home, we're entering their world, are we not? Like when we get online, there are no borders, there is no territories, right? You subject yourself to the world of cybercrime. And in this season, this is the time when even for small mid-sized businesses, this is a lot of everybody's end of their fiscal year as well. So it's not just the holidays; it's also the end of their fiscal year, and so there's a lot of transactions taking place. There's a lot of wire transfers. There's a lot of contracts being sent back and forth, and that is a prime time to exploit that, is it not?
Absolutely. And Darren and I have collectively spoken over thousands of victims. And Darren, have you ever met a victim that thought they fit the victim profile, that expected to be victimized?
No, of course not. Always surprised. I have yet to come to the ones that, well, it was our time in the barrel. We knew it was coming. Here it is. It was always like, we're too small. We don't have anything anyone would want. And that's the bad. And from a business and from an individual perspective, that's the wrong thing to think about. You may think, well, no one's going to hack me. I don't have any, I'm just
Mhm.
living in Huntsville, Alabama. I have my nice house, but the bad guys aren't targeting me. Absolutely. They've already targeted you. They already have your information. Maybe not from you directly, but from other data breaches where you now have to deal with the consequences of third-party data breaches that then are used to target you directly because now these bad guys have a dossier with all sorts of information about you, where you
So
live, what your phone number is. What's
is it
that?
fair to say there is no victim profile anymore?
No, there's no.
There
Not
is
a
no
specific
victim.
one.
And that's what
Hmm.
I want all your listeners to realize. There is no victim profile. So if you're a small business, so let's say you are the victim, you happen to be a small business, your data is stolen, your money is stolen in the business email compromise, you get hit with ransomware, or let's just say it's the holiday season and unfortunately your senior parent got ripped off in their 401k, all the money was stolen, or even worse, your kid's a victim of sextortion. And all of
That's
a sudden you
very
contact
common today.
law enforcement. Darren, what should be does law enforcement have a magic wand to fix the problem?
No, of course not.
But how often do when we go out and we bring this up when you're at a conference, people go like this, wow. I mean, and
Well,
that's what we really want people to understand here, that look, there is no victim profile. You do become victimized. Like, look, in New York, it's different. Your car gets stolen, your insurance is going to cover it. Okay. Your credit card gets compromised. But when something happens to your kids or your business, there's no amount of insurance that really repairs these situations.
Well, and in small businesses, when they get socially engineered and they do a wire transfer, there's a lot of banks that will not be reimbursing a business. There's a timeline, I believe, but most banks won't be reimbursing because the transaction was initiated by the customer, by the bank customer, right? They said, please wire our money to this place, and the bank facilitated it. So it's not really there isn't a Calvary that's going to come in and save these organizations, is there?
Well, and Darren, please jump in with this. And that's why I tell people don't use your debit card. Use
Why
your
not?
credit card when you're shopping online. And also, even if there is a situation where bad guy gets into your debit card, if you're a consumer and you catch it in 30 days or so, it's still a pain in the ass, but you can get your money back. But not
Right.
if you're a small business. If you're a small business and you're using a debit card, you are putting yourself at risk because you are under UCC rulings, which means that you have 24 hours to catch the fraud. How many companies are reconciling every 24 hours?
Especially in smaller businesses, virtually none. Very, very few. So, I mean, you brought up an excellent common myth that the data clearly doesn't support, and that is many businesses believe they're too small to be targeted by cyber criminals. And that is a dangerous misconception, isn't it? Right? Like, how can they, you know, the two of you talk a lot about most of this is completely preventable. And how can they do that? Um, isn't it about addressing like going through your own processes and identifying a process for verifying independently before something is done involving finances or sensitive information? Oftentimes it comes down to getting the right advice and creating the right policies. What are
Well,
I
your
think first,
thoughts?
first you have to understand the threats that are targeting you. If you don't know who's even targeting you, you don't know how to create a policy to protect against it. So you have to start with do we understand the threat picture? It all has
Right.
to start there, because if you can understand the threat picture, you can then have the capability to assess your risk, right? And you can say, okay, do we have the right policies in place? Are we doing the right things? Do we have the right controls in place, right? Scott talks a lot about the key critical control set, and he'll talk about this after I'm done. But if you start there, then the more advanced stuff, the non-critical, you can get to those eventually. But if you don't start with those first key things, you have strong password management, do you have multi-factor authentication, do you know who's on your network, all those kind of things, then it doesn't matter what you think if you don't understand how you're being targeted. And that takes outside help to come and tell you what that is, because unless you have your own threat team that can assess it for you, and if you're under $100 million company, you don't have that, you don't have anything, then you need to bring in someone who can say, let me help you figure out, here's what it looks like for you. Because if you're a retailer that sells women's shoes, you have a different attack profile as far as who's attacking you than a defense industrial base company that makes widgets for rockets.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, and it gets back to like you can't defend against a foe you don't know, right? Like you have
Right.
to understand who is out there targeting people, organizations like you, and then how do you implement the best steps?
And it goes back to the thing that nobody ever expects to become a victim. So why should I deal with that?
Right.
Now, and as I sit here all the time, and my mantra is this four truths of cybersecurity, because what we're trying to do is change behavior. We're trying to change behavior before it happens. And we spend so much time going, well, we got to look at the NIST framework. We got to, understand our risk appetite. And I'm like, nobody understands what that means.
Right.
It really doesn't. You sit here and let's just go look at the fact that in the United States itself, there are probably more sole proprietors than any other type of business that's out there. These are businesses made up of people like us. They don't understand the NIST framework. That's not their core competency. So how do we try to do it? Hey guys, there's a couple of, and this is when I go in and I try to change behavior, and I don't talk technology. I'm not a technologist. I'm not using the terms core critical controls in any of my presentations anymore. I'm not using risk appetite. I'm just saying, look, if I could go back in time and I can sit with victims, these are the five things I would tell them. Social engineering, number one tool in the cyber criminals tool belt. All they want to do is steal your password. That's it. These are the 7 or 8 different elements. Artificial intelligence is making it a lot worse. Because of the dark web, there's tons of usernames and passwords out there. Have you identified your mission critical accounts at home? Because if you don't do this, if you're a business owner and you don't do this at home, you can spend as much money as you want. So, what are those core critical accounts that you have that you need to secure with a strong, robust password and two-factor authentication? In my experience, from the people who contact me, and I'm dealing with tons of them, 95% of them would have been prevented if they just would have done this. But we got an antivirus. Okay, that's great.
Right.
But we got identity theft protection. All right, that's not going to save you. Well, I use a VPN in my house. I'm like, all right, that's great. And these are the same things. I've been talking to. This is why I'm so good at what I do. I've been talking about the same 5 things for the past 15 years. I don't talk about new things.
They're just not sinking in yet, right?
Maybe
So
they will, maybe they don't. I'm not saying that the businesses, I mean, that's why the work that you guys are doing and the work that Darren is doing is so important, especially for the small businesses. But I don't care if you don't do it. Just listen, I give everyone my email address. If you got a problem, call me and I'll
mhm.
use it as a good story. But I'm not getting your money back. The FBI's not getting your money back. And Darren, who are the threat actors these days that are responsible? Because I get a question all the time, and you can answer this. How come the FBI? How come you can't put more bad guys in jail?
Oh, I
Yeah,
love
because
that question.
they're not in the U.S.
Right.
What do you mean? We got
And
extra. We got ALATs all over the country. The FBI. We got people in these countries.
Yeah, because this is not the TV show FBI Cyber on CBS on Thursdays at 8 o'clock, because we're not going to solve these problems in 60 minutes, and we're not going to take, let's say we find a bad guy's phone, right? There's a bad guy affiliate in the U.S. We're not going to be able to take that phone, stick it on a table, and everything on the phone pops up in front of me that I can say, oh, hey, there's a link to the main bad guy, and we can now fly out in our private jet and go arrest him. That stuff doesn't happen. That is completely fictitious and
I
false.
didn't even
You have
have
to go
money for
through,
gas at times. Remember those
right,
times?
exactly. Yeah, of course. You have to go through
Well,
multiple layers of legal process to figure out that the IP address you're trying to detect is in Beijing, China. And I'll be honest with you, the authorities in Beijing aren't accepting legal process from the US to give them information on who maintains that server.
right. And most of these organizations, especially the ones that operate in an organized fashion on the Eastern Bloc of the world, they operate with impunity, don't they? And that's something that a lot of small businesses and individuals don't understand, right?
No.
From the individual level, as they're scrolling through, when we talk about our elderly relatives or our youthful relatives, right? They're scrolling through social media, they see an offer that seems too good to be true on something that they are interested in because the algorithm is feeding them that, and they click on that ad and they look to do a transaction, but the site is fraudulent and tied back to cybercrime, right? Because
Mhm.
nobody's checking what's on the back end of that image that's advertising for it. But the organized crime that's targeting the small businesses, look, they operate with impunity, right? Like so long as they don't target a CIS country or a group that was formerly of the USSR, nothing's really going to happen to them.
Yeah, and I will say that it's not like no one ever gets arrested, right? Some of them have poor
Correct.
operational security. You can figure out who they are. They traveled to Vietnam or a extradition friendly
Or they
country,
wind
and
up
they
in
do get
Miami for some reason.
right,
Like
or they do get
whenever they,
arrested, and that,
yeah,
but they're drops in the bucket. I mean, there was
right.
an arrest last week, 2 weeks ago,
Yeah, it was
of
2 weeks ago.
A Russian group
Call
that did
center.
all sorts of,
Yep.
yeah, all sorts of, but they targeted Russian people and Russian entities.
Right.
That's where you go wrong. Don't target the Russians. If you're in Russia, they'll never care, but target the Russians, they'll care. I had a case 2007, 2008. We were trying to get information on a particular hacker group. They wouldn't give us any. The Russians wouldn't give us any. We gave them a CD with 400,000 compromised Russian IP addresses. Those people got arrested. So there you go.
We're not going to
Well,
arrest our way out of this problem, and
No, no,
this is
of course
something
right.
that we've talked about all the time. And I get hit so often with at conferences. I was just at one in Indianapolis, no, Louisville, and the guy was like, "I don't get it. How come you guys with the FBI? How come you can't do more?" And this was a battle I would face all the time. Majority of the cases, we're not putting the bad guys in jail. We're not getting people's money back. So, do we hire more analysts and assistant section chiefs at FBI headquarters, Darren? To build up more capabilities in Washington, D.C.? And I was told before by senior executives, we're not the Federal Bureau of Education. We're the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We came into this job to investigate. And the guys are trained investigators. They go out, they track down those IP addresses. And we're seeing that it's these bad guys overseas. And some of them are brought to justice because of the hard work by FBI agents and Secret Service. But it's like the drug cartels. We're not arresting our way out of the problem.
Mhm.
Right.
And
It's it's really
there's too
about
many, right, there's
no, go ahead.
too many means to scam people. I mean, sitting here in the last 28 minutes, I've got a scam email about my student loan and a phone number to call to correct my student loan issue. 58 years old, don't have any student loans, needless to say. And someone named Winnie DuPont on LinkedIn is interested in my area of expertise and like to discuss some potential opportunities. So unless there's a Winnie DuPont on this webinar, I'm going to say that's not a real person. If I had to guess. So it's all day, every day, and they do this with impunity because LinkedIn's not going to get rid of this account, right? I can't report the email to anybody, so I will get 3 more today, and more. And I just responded to Winnie. If she responds back, I'll let y'all know what she said. But I'm going to guess it. She's
Is
not
this
going to
Winnie, the
give me.
CEO of that laboratory company, or is this?
Yes, it is. Yes, yes. She's chief executive of Vitalis Laboratory. Did you get the same one?
Yeah. Yeah,
There you go.
it's just amazing,
Mhm.
David.
Mhm.
And that's why it's all about the collaboration. It's all about things that Darren and I work on. It's all about what I call having the cyber secure mindset. It's all why in 2025, myself and focusing with a partner and bringing Darren in, my goal is keep 1 million families safe,
Yeah.
keep seniors safe. And, one of the more fulfilling projects, is Darren sticking his toe into it. One of my best projects this year was building a talk track for a senior living facility, because no matter how much money they were spending on their MDR, EDR, XDR solutions and firewalls, bad guys were still scamming seniors.
And when we think of the effectiveness of social engineering, why is it so impactful? Is it distraction? Is it the amount of just personal data that is now out there on the dark
It's
web
been
that
going
they
on for
exploit?
decades. When I started with the FBI, I was thrown into working white collar cases. And what were white collar cases? Economic crime cases. Nobody pointed a gun. Somebody sent somebody money because they were tricked. My first
Uh,
case was dealing with a guy. They were advanced fee schemes. You give me something for something, invest in this project. And a lot of times they skirted on the law of civil. Today, with the
mhm,
use of technology, it moved as soon as it got done, because we used to investigate the FBI mail fraud and wire fraud. That was the
right.
overarching things. Uh, I think mail fraud probably went away in the 90s, and then it kind of moved that we were getting, people had fax machines. And that's
Mhm,
when you would start getting these fax letters that were coming in from
right.
the Nigerians. Then it turned into email. So now, where are we seeing this? We have email, we have text messages, we have telephone calls, we have account takeovers. We're seeing it in every way possible. Romance scams. Facebook.
Mm,
What
right.
is social engineering? LinkedIn messages, social engineering. Pop ups, social engineering. And what do they want to get us to do? They're tricking us. And now we're working and developing, because now there's a real intersection. We have cybercrime and social engineering, and we have artificial intelligence. And Darren, speak on that a little bit, because you're seeing that all the time. How is artificial intelligence influencing, coming to the intersection of social engineering and cybercrime?
Well, the biggest problem with social engineering that bad guys have is there's several things they cannot do. They cannot duplicate, or they couldn't, let me rephrase that, they couldn't really duplicate a voice to not make it sound like it's coming from Russia, East Asia, wherever. Poor English when they're typing up emails or they're typing up messages. Right now, go into AI and say, this is the message I want to say, craft it in a way that sounds like I'm from New York City or from New Jersey. And then it creates this output that they just copy paste in, and it becomes more believable. One thing I've noticed though is they don't seem to be using it very well, because still their messages kind of suck, quite frankly. But from an audio perspective, the audio AI is getting very good. There's a case of the Singapore company where there was the CFO or somebody in the business office was on a webinar with 25 other people. The 25 other people were all AI bots with fake voices, and they wire transferred $25 million out of the company because of this, because of that particular Zoom call or whatever it might have been. So AI just makes the scamming easier, creates behavior capability. Shoot, I'm sure there's on the dark web there's criminal forums that have prompts that say, if you want to create a very effective social engineering campaign, follow this prompt. Just like we all have prompts for different stuff we do, there's criminal prompts that say, do it this way, and it'll give you an output that would be much more effective than you were using in the past. Again, it's
And
Well,
just a
now,
there
tool.
are.
Darren,
Nothing.
through the use of AI, what you can do now is you can just go map out company XYZ, go to LinkedIn,
Mhm.
find every single employee who's been
Yep.
there, and now start mapping it out that way. So you're being able, and we're not even talking about the offensive capabilities of how you're using this for ransomware. I'm not even at that point. I'm just focusing on the social engineering. David, I dealt with a pig butchering. You remember my friend Darren Lovehan?
Yep.
Yes. And
Yes.
and
Okay.
explain to the viewers and the listeners about what is pig butchering. What is that phrase? Because people may see that phrase, but they may not know what it means in this context.
Well, pig butchering is nothing more than a very good, complex social engineering scam. And what will happen is that Winnie, who whatever her name is probably a pig butcherer. She is going to introduce herself to Darren, and she's going to build a platonic relationship with Darren. And the first telltale sign is she's going to get Darren to move to either Telegraph or WhatsApp. And Darren, why do they want to move to Telegraph or WhatsApp?
It's always off platform. They always bring you to a different platform. Why is
It's
that, Darren?
encrypted, and you can't surveil it.
Right.
And what they
And
do
then
now is they're going to go over to target an individual, and they're going to. And I just had a really heartbreaking one where the guy lost $5.8 million, and you're like,
That's
how
so
can
such a
anyone
shame.
lose $5.8 million? How can anyone be so gullible? But they
But it's
started
not.
out
These
with this.
people are bright. Like the victims are not dumb or naive or gullible.
And
Like
they don't
the
live in this
social,
world like we do.
right.
Like we can spot a social engineering scam. But this
Mhm.
guy, the cyber criminal said, I'd like you to invest in, I want to talk about cryptocurrency investing. And he said, I don't know anything about it.
But
So
that plays in, doesn't that play into everybody's like people have FOMO, people have fear of
yeah.
missing out. They see that Bitcoin is going through the roof and they're like, my 401k isn't doing as good as it could be doing. Why don't I take some of my money and invest in this? This person has earned my trust and they'll kind
When
of
I interviewed
do it
one of
in a
these,
traditional investment fraud scam, right? They'll
when I
invest a little, it'll
interviewed one
go
of
up
these bad
and they'll get
guys,
more.
David, and I had the conversation with Love Han, this pseudo
Mhm.
person who was using artificial intelligence and chat and Google Translate to communicate with me. I said, how do
Hmm.
you live with yourself on this? And they said, look, I didn't take money from anyone who didn't deserve it. These people are so
Mhm.
stupid. So this guy gets this fake trading app, and because Darren, right, if there's an app that these people direct you to the Apple store or the Android store, we're all told to make sure we don't download apps from websites. So if you download an app from the Apple store, it has to be legitimate and truthful, right?
One would
supposed
think.
to be. Supposed to be.
Yep.
But anyone could. No, it has to be free of bugs. It doesn't mean that anything. They
Right.
put
That's
this
correct.
simulated trading app on the App Store, which is nothing more than a calculator. Okay, with graphs. So the bad guy types in $10,000. They do a simulated trade, and then the bad guy goes, "Okay, now you have $72,000 in your account." So what do you think happens when the cyber criminal see that the victim sees that he has more money in the account? He keeps putting more in.
Right.
So Darren, how do we go from this guy initially investing $250 to 5.8 million? What was the progression here? Even though you weren't involved with this, but what do you think happened?
Well, there's a psychology to it, right? There's actually posted a link to an article or to a paper on the psychology of cyber scams on LinkedIn, and it gets to the point where people have a self-perpetuating need to be right. So I've invested $1,000. I'm not going to jump out because I've clearly done my research, so I know this is good. So
Right.
I'm going to keep adding to it because there's a self-fulfilling prophecy where they just need to add a little more and it'll solve the problem. And that is why the bad guys are winning, because that's that social engineering aspect they're keying in on that piece of human psychology that says, well, I'm too smart to be scammed. This can't be a scam. I just have to add a little more money to get a little more money out. Plus, there's the greed piece, right? There's also the greed piece because part of the scam, you see a big win right at the beginning, and then maybe it'll go down a little bit, and the bad guy will say, well, the reason that happened is because you're not at this particular threshold for the money to really be made. You just need to add a little bit more. And then when you ultimately get to the point where I don't think this is right, and they get the idea you're going to pull it out, then it's all disappears.
And
Absolutely.
it goes to the point now, our victim here, to almost simplify it, it's like when you're going to Vegas and you're playing craps and you're up a little more money, you just keep putting more money in. So he sees that $10,000 turns into $75,000. So he invests $250 of his own, and that turns into 3 grand. He's on the hook now. This is where they call it pig butchering, because now he's like, okay, wow, I made 3 grand. Guy has some cash. He goes, I'll put 1,000 in. He puts the 1,000 in. That turns into 27,000. He keeps going. He keeps going. He keeps going. He's putting it in because he sees the app and he sees the money going out. And at that time, that's when they're ready to slaughter the pig. How did I find out about it? Because I got a call from a friend of mine who went to high school with this guy, who called me up and said, hey, Scott, my buddy called me up. He wants $250,000. When I called the victim, I had a hard time convincing the victim he was actually a victim.
Right.
I said, how much
Hadn't
money do
seen
you
it yet.
have on the hook here? He says, I got $690 million in this account. And all I need to do is pay another $250,000 to get the taxes on it. And that was
Right.
a
And
very
none of it
difficult.
was real. None of it was real because it was just on, it's almost very similar to what Bernie Madoff used to do, right? Like you would see in an account on an app or on a website, oh, you have all this money, but there really is no money in the back.
Yeah.
You're never getting that out. It's just a website that's
But you
showing a
know what was
chart
real,
of things
David?
going up.
You know what was real? When he came to me and he said, the question I get all the time, what's the chances I'm going to get my money back?
Yeah, it's really sad at that
How
point.
do you look at someone in the eye knowing what we know, Darren, and have to have that conversation where you have a person who was a high net worth individual? Now, it doesn't mean like I know there are people out there
Oh,
who are
but this
saying, I don't
happens
know,
to people of every element, like every
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 income
every
level.
level. Right.
Maybe I had a guy before that who I knew lost $600,000.
Hmm.
And then another person lost 300,000. And then when I'm dealing with a victim who only lost 1,500, I'm like, well, yeah, at least you're not these guys. And Darren, what do you think happened when, I contact the local FBI office? Because when I was with the FBI in 2018, I made it a point to talk to every victim in Nashville. I was getting maybe 3 to 5 victims a week.
It's
Darren, how many
exponentially
victims do
more
you think
now.
Nashville's getting a week through IC3 that are coming into the office now?
How many leads are they getting from IC3?
A
Probably
week.
none.
They're getting 100 to
Oh,
150 a week are being
I
reported.
stand corrected. Oh, being
Yeah,
reported. I get
being
that. Yeah, yeah.
reported. Now, when you're
Yeah.
getting all these leads, when you have 2 people, how many can you really actually address?
I don't know. 10 a month if you're
None.
lucky, maybe. Yeah,
Right.
right, exactly. And there's a priority too, right? It's you have to prioritize it. If this person lost $100 and this person lost 100,000, talk to the 100,000 person, but you may never get to the $100. But that $100 may have been just as much as important to that person as the 100,000 to the other person. It's a
Right.
resource
Yeah.
issue.
I'm going to put you on the spot,
Hey,
Darren, like I always do.
Oh, yes,
You,
I'm used to this. Yes.
Yes, you are with my obscure question because you were actually a cyber investigator. You came into the Bureau. So, what would be the legitimate investigative steps if the U.S. Attorney's Office said, "Okay, this is a political appointee, Darren Mott with the FBI. You need to open a case on this wire transferred $5.8 million. We're going to give you grand jury subpoenas
Okay.
Where do you go? What are the logical steps?
Uh, okay. You start off with what communications have you had with the person? I need the header so I can try to identify where the emails come from. If you have wire transfers, give me the wire transfer information so I can figure where the wire went. But I know that's going to go nowhere because ultimately it's going to be at some US bank that then gets wired overseas. And
Right.
I'm going to need a mutual legal assistance treaty document to go overseas to give to law enforcement there to say, please trace this particular wire transfer. That's going to take you 6 to 8 months through not just the U.S. Attorney's Office, but through DOJ directly, the State Department, all that stuff. It may ultimately get over there, but then the trail's lost because the logs are gone because the retention policy on most entities is 3 months. So if you don't submit this stuff within 3 months, there's no log files for you to measure. Yeah, I
And what if
mean,
the
what
money's
else?
going to China?
You're done. It's done. Over. It
What if
ends
it's
there.
going to Russia?
Ends there.
Same
What
thing.
about West Africa?
And it depends on the country, but probably
Yeah.
not going to go very far. The
Yeah, but you
infrastructure is
see
not
where
going to
we're
be that
going
great.
here.
Let's just
You know
say.
what I mean? But
Yeah.
could that have been prevented? Could it have been prevented with the right education?
Yeah.
See,
From
I'm going to slightly disagree there because we're starting to see education is not necessarily working correctly because it's the way that the education exists. If it's the once a year, here's your IT and your cybersecurity training, and you do it as a course of your work, you're going to do it as quickly as you can because it's probably the same PowerPoint as last year. Nothing retains out of it. There is no training for people at home, right? That training doesn't exist. I mean, well, let me rephrase that. It probably exists, but no one's paying for it, right? I'm sure there's companies that say, hey, we'll give you cyber training at home, but no one's buying it. I don't see a lot of advertisements for know before home version, right? And so people have to,
it's
eh,
like other professional development though. Like doing something once a year is just inadequate. Like it needs to
right.
be ongoing and it needs to be job embedded for it to actually, and then you need to be able to measure the behavior, right? Like none of these platforms or systems are perfect, but the ones that provide empirical data of behavior change are helpful, right? But I agree. Like I think the education model in general in raising awareness needs to be ongoing.
Well, I think
It
it has to start with why you're doing the training, right? It goes back to
right,
understanding the threats. The training doesn't start with the underlying premise of here's who's coming at you and why. It's here's what a phishing email looks like. Here's what a business email compromise email looks like. Don't click
right.
on the basic stuff. I get all that, but there's not an underlying rationale to say here's why you should pay attention to this.
Yep,
Until you become a victim, then you're paying attention, right? So that's why I think
right.
Scott and I, when we do these webinars and stuff, we try to give as many real life stories as possible to say, hey, here's kind of how it happens, because then people get engaged and say, okay, I guess I need to learn more, right? I need to understand that a little better. Like I had to talk to a lady yesterday. She thought her husband was in her computer. I think he probably was in her OneDrive because she didn't have multi-factor authentication. So I walked her through how to turn on multi-factor authentications, not have her sons attached to her OneDrive and protect. But again, she didn't realize that's kind of how it would happen. I get it. I mean, it's not everybody can know everything, but you have to want to know it to start with.
Absolutely.
Hey,
So
if anyone has
let
any
me
questions, please hit us up. We'd love to make this about you all.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And while we're getting some audience questions, one issue that I keep hearing of for in the small business space is the supply chain, right? As in the holiday season, as people are entering the end of their fiscal year, there's a lot of invoices going back and forth. There's a lot of contracts being negotiated, right? People are shoring up vendors, changing banking and things, and there's a lot of, you know, social engineering that occurs where they're going to impersonate a common vendor that a small business may be using. And that vendor could be anything. It could be your HVAC vendor. It could be a software provider that you're using. And they're going to be changing some of the wiring instructions. What, in your experience, gentlemen, like what are some of the things that a small business can do to create the right policies or to watch for in that context?
Well, I have to ask someone to tell them what should their policies be. Because I'm going to guess that most of them don't have policies to start with. And it's funny you mentioned supply chain. I only say that's funny because like for 2020, if there was a cyber word of the year in 2024, supply chain is that word. In 2023,
Absolutely.
it was zero trust. Supply chain is nothing
Right.
new. It's just your third party people you interface
Your
with, right?
vendors,
That's
your
your supply chain.
subcontractors, right? Your
Right? Who do you?
suppliers,
Yeah,
right?
right. And that's always been a problem. Go all the way
Yep.
back to Target. Scott,
Yes.
How did the Target breach occur?
I love that story.
Went into
I mean, I don't
someone
love
else.
it, but it's a good educational story, right? So many
Right. It
people are
was
like, I can't believe Target fell victim to a cyber attack. And it's like, well, wait, hang on.
they didn't.
Like
Yeah,
they didn't. It was their
right.
HVAC vendor, right?
Right, exactly. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, look at Snowflake. Let's take Snowflake for example,
Yeah.
or Move It. Pick your poison. Right. The people that were victimized by the Move It problem were victimized not because they had poor cybersecurity, is because
Correct.
Move It had a vulnerability. Now the problem became once the vulnerability was identified, they didn't patch it. So that's a whole different discussion altogether. But you have to. I mean, you have to look beyond just is Gladys in finance clicking on a spear phishing link. It's a whole holistic thing. There's all these other things you have to also deal with. I mean, you should ask all of your third party providers, when's the last cyber assessment you had, and can I see the results? I want to see how well you did, because maybe we
Well,
need to
then the
rethink how we
companies
do
aren't
business.
doing that, Darren. They're not doing it themselves. They don't know to
That's
ask.
why exactly, that's my point, Scott, is you have to ask for help, right? If you're a $0 to $100 million company, you're not doing anything. Find someone who can help you do the basics. The basics aren't hard. I'm not saying we need to sell you an EDR, an XDR, an MDR, a DDR, a PDR, PBR, whatever, the acronym of the day. Start with this basic thing. Let's do a simple assessment with 10 basic controls. Are you doing them? Because if you're not,
Right.
at least start there, because there's 100 other ones you should be doing that you're not. I know you disagree, Scott, but you're not dealing with
No,
the
I
business
don't
people. You said you
disagree.
gave up.
No, I do not disagree. But here's the thing, Darren. You see, your level of frustration isn't at my level of frustration, because I've been telling people for the past 15 years you need to put two-factor authentication on
Right.
like your remote, on everything remote, like Salesforce and this. And I get up and I speak to 150 small businesses, and nobody's doing that at all. Nobody is really going there. And then I hear you guys going, okay, we want the small businesses to do an assessment. And I just can't maintain my composure when I'm like, I can't get them to do the basic shit, you
Right.
know?
I
Yeah,
understand.
so I'm
I
not
know.
saying that I totally agree. I agree
Mhm.
100%.
Well, and that kind of brings up a good question. Like, how do the audience members feel that they themselves individually or their organization is in handling and being prepared? Like, how are they doing it? And I believe Ashley just launched a poll. It'll be interesting to see how people feel they're doing in terms of some of those controls that you're mentioning.
I'd love to hear from the very prepared person. Why do you think you're very prepared? I would love to hear why that is. That would be great.
I'd love to meet a
I'm not
very
saying
prepared
I'm
person.
not
I don't
saying you're
believe
not.
I
I'm
don't
not
have
saying you're
a
not at
very
all.
prepared.
But like, what's the trick?
Well,
That's
it
the
could be
question, right?
somebody, in all honesty, it could be somebody that works for like a financial institution or a bank that has a lot of controls in
Yeah,
place. They have
because
exams.
they're never victimized. United
Right.
Well,
Healthcare.
and you know what? I've been doing a lot of works with banks lately because I figured out, my ideal customer is the marketing people, because it's
Mm.
not the bank security people. Because I'm like, look, congratulations, the banks, you're not getting victimized. The victimizations are still up. We're just pushing it down to the end users.
Well, do you feel that, what are some of the steps that that individuals can be taking? Let's step back from the SMBs. Let's talk about the individuals and their holiday frenzies, right? And they're shopping online and they're seeing ads and they're shipping out things and they're getting texts about packages. What are some of the things that they can be cognizant of or be aware? I mean, does it boil down to truly like verifying through the legitimate source, meaning don't trust the text or the email itself. Don't call the number that's in the email or in the text. Actually go open up a browser and call the actual place.
I would say
Does
that,
it
but
really
don't,
boil
but do
down
not.
to
Yes,
those steps?
yes, but don't rely on a Google. Like, don't do Amazon customer support on a Google search and call the first number that pops up. The bad
Correct.
guys know how to do search engine optimization as well, and they've done it to the point where they're the first ones that pop up. Actually, go to Amazon.com, find customer service, and go that route or wherever. I mean,
Go pick
if
it
you're if
up
you
on
Great
your app.
advice. Yeah.
That's the whole situation. Be prepared. And that's it. You get a
and
problem,
be skeptical.
you get a text message from your bank. Boom. I have the number of my bank. I have all of these things. I'm not clicking on links. I am being prepared that of social engineering all the time. Because all it takes is one little slip up for you to get access. And what are these slip ups? For everyone out here, it's very simple. If you do not have two-factor authentication on all of your personal shopping brands, your bank account, your email, you're going to get ripped off. You know,
Mhm.
in today's day and age, if you haven't frozen your credit, you're going to get ripped off. You know,
And
there's
that's
so
a
much.
great, and that's great advice. That's something that we spread when we're doing our lunch and learns and our security awareness is always talking to at the individual level. Everybody should freeze their credit, should they not? Like in today's day and age, it
You
used
need
to
a
be more of a
why. You need
hassle.
a
It's
why.
very
Why do you
easy to
need to
do
do it?
now. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to. Can you guys explain why it's so important to for everybody to freeze their credit as well as freeze their children's credit? Why is that so important today?
Because you can assume that your social security number has been compromised, and it doesn't take
Absolutely.
much information to be able to use that information to create identity theft, create fake credit cards, all that kind of stuff. If you freeze your
Yep.
credit, when the bad guy goes to create that new credit card, it won't go through because credit's frozen.
And
That's
they will
simple as that.
move on to somebody who hasn't, right? At
Correct.
the
Yes,
end of the
that's right.
day, it's like we don't have to be like, if you consider a threat actor to be the bear in the woods that wants to attack you, you'll never be able to outrun that bear, right? You don't have to. You just have to outrun the person next to you that is not using multi-factor authentication, that is not freezing their credit, that is not, bolstering their using good password managers and having identity theft protection, right? It's you just need to be better than them because of the mind of the cyber criminal. They're going for the easiest thing, the fastest thing. And so if you put up some resistance, they will move on from you and go to the next one. God, God willing, right?
We did have one question come in for you all. It's not super related. Well, it's not totally related to holiday scams, but not unrelated.
Let's
Should
hear it.
businesses pay the ransom in a ransomware attack?
Excellent
Scott, you
question.
get that question all the time. So I'll give you the FBI answer.
Yeah.
I'm a retired FBI, so I just tell you what the FBI will say is don't pay the
Yep.
ransom. Darren Mott's answer, and this was Darren Mott's answer when he was with the FBI talking about this stuff, is do what you have to do to protect your business. If it's
Right.
cheaper to pay the ransom and hope you get the decryption keys, because there's never a guarantee, then you do what you have to do to keep your business going. Now, you have to be careful in some shape or form because there are certain Bitcoin wallets that are on the denied entities list, meaning you can't really, it's illegal to pay them. But bad guys know what those are and they don't use those anymore. So it's not really that big a deal. But ideally, if you don't have backups, you have no way to get the information out and you're screwed otherwise, pay the ransom. But that doesn't guarantee that you're going to get your money back. If they stole data in addition to the ransomware, there's no guarantee, and it's more than likely they will not delete your data even if they tell you did. But you have to make a risk assessment. What's the best thing for me to do? Scott may have a different answer, but that's Darren Mott's answer.
Well, my answer is this. Ransomware used to be the main culprit. Today, it's a data breach. So
Right.
the first thing they're doing today is stealing your information.
Mhm.
Okay. Then they're going to try to encrypt the backups. Then they're going to encrypt your network. And then I hate to say it at that point, when you get to the point in life when you have to determine are you going to pay the ransom or not pay the ransom, you failed. And we
Yeah,
were
right.
giving out guidance in 2016 on what to do. on how to prevent ransomware. This was back before the days of EDR, MDR, and XDR. And you know what? The guidance is still the same. So we have to really focus on changing the conversation and really focusing on the prevention of ransomware, which is a whole different thing.
Absolutely. Well, hey, I want to thank you, gentlemen, both for your insight. Very, very helpful. Give us some great insight from people that have dealt with helping victims throughout, and we thank you both for joining. We thank everybody for attending, and hope you gain value and some unique insight here.
Thank you all so
Thank
much
you
for
all. Happy
joining.
holidays.
Thank
Happy
Thanks.
you.
holidays, everybody.